I think the highest expression of this is to land in a place where it's not this or that, it's this and
Yes,
that.
yes,
Like to
totally.
replace or with and to be able to hold both truths, like to be able to hold the duality
Mm-hmm.
and sort of rise above it and see it for what it is.
Yes.
Without getting completely swept up in one side having to be right and one side having to be wrong. Welcome to the Weekly Transit, a podcast exploring the intersection of Western astrology and Jungian psychology. Astrology is a language that communicates how the planets and stars influence life on Earth, while psychology helps us navigate both conscious and unconscious experiences. Together, these tools offer the potential for self-understanding, growth, and transformation. Join astrologer Scott Tajarian and me, psychotherapist Gabriella Durso, as we dive into the cosmic forecast each week.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. This is the week of May 20th to the 26th. Hi, Gabriella.
Hey, Scott.
So this week, there's a lot of shifting happening because we've got 3 planets transiting into the same sign. There is the Sun, Venus, and Jupiter all transiting into Gemini. Well, we're also going to be highlighting the full moon in Sagittarius, which happens this week. The signs that we're going to be discussing most prominently are going to be Taurus, Gemini, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. As we said earlier, the Sun, Venus, and Jupiter transit from Taurus to Gemini. Mars, Chiron, and the North Node continue their transits through Aries, though we're not really going to be talking about them this week, but it's important to just bring up, just to give a foundation of the energy where it is. So because Mars, Chiron, and the North Node are still transiting through Aries, there is still that focus of who am I, my sense of self-confidence, my fears, my insecurities, what do I need to face in order to claim my self-confidence. Even though the Sun, Venus, and Jupiter are all transiting from Taurus into Gemini, Mercury and Uranus, though we're not really talking about them this week, are both still transiting through Taurus. So by the end of this week, there's going to be 3 planets transiting through Gemini. There's going to be Mars, Chiron in the North Node in Aries. Mercury and Uranus will still be transiting through Taurus. Pluto, of course, is transiting through Aquarius. And Saturn and Neptune, though we're not really discussing those 2 planets this week, are still transiting through Pisces. So these are the 5 signs where the planets are transiting through. So things are starting to spread out a little bit. They've been very intense in the early part of the year. The first quarter, everything was bunched up into 4 signs. Now things are starting to spread out a little bit as 3 planets move into Gemini. So there will be planets in Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. So not only do these planets transiting into Gemini, which is an air sign, sort of elevate the energy, but the fact that the planets are moving into more signs, that is also going to give us a little more space.
It sounds like more balance.
More balance.
And more levity with the Gemini energy.
Exactly.
That sounds like a relief.
Yes,
Sounds
I think
good.
so. I think so. Absolutely. It really feels like this is the time of year to push forward, to get ahead, to really think about what's next. Start making your moves if you haven't already. There's a lot of energy during this time, it seems. You know, recently I went back up to Santa Barbara where I went to college, and spoke at a reunion dinner for my fraternity, which was very exciting to be honored in that way, to be asked to share knowledge of the language of astrology with a bunch of men.
It was a huge milestone for you.
Yeah. And so, there's this thing that I always say, that you have one job in this life, and that's to learn to love yourself. That's why you only have one job. And you've been noticing recently how more and more people that you come into contact with, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, are in some way, somehow, reflecting you. And so, you've made this funny joke that we're all just really narcissistic.
No, that makes it sound problematic. Let me reframe.
Yeah.
I said we're all looking for ourselves.
We're looking for ourselves,
which
yes.
I think is lovely.
Lovely, not narcissistic.
No. Hey, there is, just like anything, like anything, there is a healthy amount to have, whether it's a healthy amount of your ego or a healthy relationship with narcissism. I mean, these terms sound really charged and negative, and they're meant to pathologize people. And some people who we categorize as narcissists have too much of that energy. But there is also, you don't want the flip side of it either. So there's a healthy amount of wanting to center yourself. So I say that lovingly, and I just think it's an interesting dynamic when clients come to me, and I'm sure you've seen this in your practice as well, and they're reflecting you, and so they're looking to you for wisdom, and you're reflecting back to them dynamics in their own chart.
Yes.
And I just think there's something really beautiful and interesting about that, because it doesn't happen with everyone, but when it does happen, it gives me some information about what's going on for that client that they might be looking for in themselves through their relationship with me.
Yes.
But it's not problematic. It's just
I wasn't saying
it's just information.
I wasn't saying that it was, and that's why it was a joke. The whole
Is
narcissist
this your
thing.
sarcasm again?
Yeah, I guess so. So, but I just brought it up because in being back in Santa Barbara and reconnecting to a lot of these men who I haven't seen in several years, some in a couple decades, but I was getting the daytime in place of their births while I was there, and it was really tripping me out because I was like, wow, this is why I'm friends with this person. This is why we had this strong connection in college. He's a Pisces sun, I'm a Pisces moon, or he's a Taurus moon, I'm a Taurus rising. One of the people who invited me up to speak is a Taurus moon, and I'm a Taurus rising, and people were always getting us confused at parties when we would have parties at our fraternity house. They would think that I was him, or they would think that he was me. Like, girls would come and they'd be like, well, I'm like, no, that's that guy over there. And so they thought they knew me, but it was actually they knew him, or vice versa. It's just one of those interesting things to think about, how we reflect one another. And I was always like, yeah, why do we look alike? I guess it's just one of those coincident things. But then you look at his chart and my chart, and it makes sense. Like, I was also thinking about recently, a client mentioned how Al Pacino had a child recently. He's 83 years old, and he is like on record as one of the oldest fathers. And Robert De Niro also had a child at 79 years old. And that trips me out because growing up, I would always get those two actors confused. They look the same to me. But then you look at their charts, and it's like Al Pacino is a Taurus sun. Robert De Niro is a second house sun, which is associated with the second sign, which is Taurus. Robert De Niro is a Leo sun. Al Pacino is a Leo rising. and a fifth house moon, which is associated with the fifth sign, which is Leo. Al Pacino is a Sagittarius moon. Robert De Niro is a ninth house moon, which is associated with the ninth sign, which is Sagittarius. So they're both born with the fifth house, the house of children, in Scorpio. So I was just like, I wonder what that means in terms of both of them having children this late in life. So,
well, Scorpio is the world of the unseen.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe not regarding the world of reality, which would be that they're older and maybe should stop having children. No judgment, but
no, not at all.
But maybe, they're living in
this sort of secret reality,
in this, their own sort of a reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting.
I think this is something we haven't really had a chance to talk that much about on the podcast, but it's one of the most fascinating things to me about astrology is how it shapes the way you look, your body.
Yes.
And you always say it's shaping us
from body
to soul.
Yes.
And we've talked a bit on here, and we've had some questions, wanting us to continue talking about how, Aries rules the head, Pisces rules the feet. But it goes so much deeper than that you can look at thinking of your database. I think this is something probably our audience doesn't know, but you have this incredible database of, I don't know, thousands of public figures where you've pulled not only their birth chart information and categorized it, but you also have images of their faces.
Yes.
And so you can open up a file of, Virgo moons.
Yep.
Or Cancer rising, and you can actually see the similarities between people when they're lined up like that.
Yes.
Whether it's the arch in their eyebrows, the shape of their eyes, their chin, their ears. I mean, it's wild.
Yes.
It's wild. And I really at some point want you to find a platform or like a way to share this information, because it's just mind-blowing.
It is, yes. I'd love to do like a study one day where I could get, like a university or someone is funding this, where I could get hundreds or thousands of volunteers to come in. They do they give me their date, time, and place of birth. We take a picture of I get like a professional headshot photographer. They would take a picture of them, and then we can categorize it, not just because I'm just digging on the internet on like whatever websites to find headshots of public figures. It's a lot of research, but I think it'd be fun to do that with regular folks.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. So, and to really do like more of a scientific, like official study where we're getting the date, time, and place, and the photograph of the person, and then doing like some sort of exhibit where we're showing all the images of the Cancer rising versus the Capricorn rising, and really see like, oh my God, look at how these people look so similar. That's so wild.
I already know what you can call that.
What's that?
The faces of astrology.
Ah, I like that. The faces of astrology. Yes. Yes. Very cool.
That will come to fruition at some point.
Yes.
But this experience you had in Santa Barbara felt like such a big milestone for you.
It was huge.
It felt incredible for you to be honored and seen in a way that you haven't been by these men.
Yes.
And I think largely for you to be invited was really important, because so often, we've talked a little bit about human design on here, but you're a projector. And so in order for you to really share your knowledge and wisdom, you have to be invited.
Yes.
Otherwise, sometimes the information isn't received well.
Exactly. I've felt that.
You've felt that many times. So for this to happen, it happened the day that Uranus and what was it?
The day that I spoke, and this was the thing, like I already knew I was going up there for this dinner, and it was the weekend that Uranus and Jupiter were conjunct in Taurus.
It was the exact day.
And Mars was forming a sextile to Uranus and Jupiter and Taurus from Pisces. All three of these planets align with my Sun and North Node. So I'm like, wow, I'm going to be going up there while these three planets are aligning with my Sun and North Node.
During a Mercury retrograde, which is about connecting to people in the past.
What's going to happen, you know? And then a few days before, my friend calls me and was like, hey, we're having trouble finding a keynote speaker. Would you be interested in talking to the group at the dinner? And I was like, yeah, of course. I'm like, wow, this is the thing. This is the unexpected surprise. And it was just such an honor. And I, you know, one of my friends who's like one of the individuals that's putting this together, all three of them, it's really these three guys that put together the dinner every year. And all three of them were just blown away by what I had to share. And I was just so honored. I really worked hard on, I didn't really write a speech, but I knew what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. And I had key talking points and stories that I wanted to share and how to integrate them into the overarching theme with some questions that would be broached to my audience, my fraternity brothers, that would hopefully inspire and empower them. And by the end of it, you know, these guys all clapped for me, and then they were asking me questions. This was after I had spoken already for like 30, 40 minutes. They clapped, they asked me more questions. I spoke for another 5-10 minutes. And, you know, some of the guys there came up to me and were like, that was the best keynote address we've ever had in 30 years that we've been doing this dinner. Like, have you been preparing for this your whole for years or something? I was like,
as a matter of fact, yes.
How did you put this together? And it's like, we told you on Monday that we wanted you to speak, and like 5 days later, you have this great speech together. And so,
well, that's what happens when you're ready.
Yes, exactly.
When you're ready, yeah.
I would really love to be given more opportunities to speak to groups, to if there's anyone out there that is looking for a speaker of a group or a school or whatever it may be. Any group, could be a school, could be a company. Like, I really see myself and envision myself being in that position where I can talk to a group of people, share the language of astrology to inspire and empower them. That's one of my objectives. So this felt like another step in that direction.
Absolutely. And I think, too, what you're really gifted at doing is understanding how to work in the language of astrology into a talk that really connects to what's meaningful to that group. Because we could talk about anything as being related to astrology, you're able to fit it in and focus it in a way where it's, from what you shared, it was a meaningful part of the speech, but it also was woven seamlessly into stories and memories and other aspects of the talk.
Yes,
I think that's important too.
Yes, you've got to tell a story. You've got to humanize it. If you're just talking about Uranus and Pluto and Mars and Aquarius and these sorts of words that are not a part of our normal vocabulary, then people are going to be glassy-eyed. So you've got to relate it to a story that's going to humanize the experience of what you're sharing. And so I shared stories about college that many that I was speaking to could relate to. I shared my own personal story about how I got into astrology, and then I shared my personal story about how I became a professional interpreter of the language of astrology. And so I weave that all together. And it's You
said it felt like your TED Talk, right?
It felt like my TED Talk, yes. It's funny because, in elementary school, I used to get taken out of school once a week for several years to be a part of this special art group to do art. And then I had experience in acting classes, experiences in writing classes, a lot of writing, as wanting to be a screenwriter. And all of that has helped me become a better astrologer. Because the art is like when you do a reading with me, I draw a chart. It's hand-drawn. Those are all symbols that I drew with my hands. From the letter to the symbol to the word is my hand. So that's my art background. My acting background is helping me articulate myself in a way that is engaging and hopefully entertaining in some way. And then the writing background, the storytelling background, is what gives me the ability to tell the story of you, which is what I'm doing when I give somebody a reading. I'm telling you your story. And so when my friend said, have you been working on that for years? I was like, yeah, actually, because this is everything that I've done my whole life has led me to this point. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of it.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Such an exciting opportunity.
Yes.
I know it was a surprise, but also when you told me, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah, I wasn't really surprised either.
Because I just feel like you're on the cusp of this next thing, whatever that is. And I was just waiting for it to get here.
Yes.
So I'm curious to see how that will, what that will bring, how that will evolve.
Yes.
Because I know it will.
Thank you, Gabriella.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I feel like a lot is shifting, and the shifting is going to continue this week as we move into the first transit of the sun in Gemini. The sun is the planet of light, life, and vitality. Gemini is the mutable air sign symbolized by the twins. This is the sign mutable. It represents the end of the season. It's time to adapt, to evolve, to keep up with the shifting that is going on here. The energy that we've been solidifying prior to this Gemini energy is the Aries and Taurus energy, which Aries is who am I, Taurus is what is my value. So once we've established who we are, which is Aries, then we can establish our value, which is Taurus. Now that we have who we are established and what our value is established, now we can go out and start learning from others. We can start asking questions, gathering information. Because if you know who you are and what your value is, and I know who I am and what my value is, now we can have a conversation where I can really ask you about yourself, and you can share with me something about yourself that has value. And I can share with you something about myself that has value to you. So as the sun transits through Gemini from May 20th to June 20th, the sun is always in Gemini from around May 20th, May 21st to June 20th, June 21st. It all depends on what year and where you are and what time it is, where you are on Earth. But it's around May 20th, May 21st, June 20th, June 21st. This year it's May 20th to June 20th. This is the period to really connect, to be that conduit of information, to share information, to listen to what others are having to say to you. And what is it that you're learning from others that you can share with others that might be interested about what you've learned from others.
So once you know who you are and what you value, I think part of this shift is also about recognizing what you don't know, because Gemini is about asking questions.
Yes.
And so we often think of it as it is a really curious sign. It's a curious energy, but there's also something really, there's so much wisdom in knowing what you don't know. For example, when you ask a question, there's a level of vulnerability because you've checked in with yourself and there's a recognition that there's something that you'd like to know that you don't know. So there's a real, I guess, with the Aries and the Taurus, there's more of a sort of an internal exploration of values and identity. And then this Gemini piece feels like it really gets externalized. There's like I don't know, an image of like going fishing, or there's like that developmental period where like children start asking a lot of questions.
What's this? What's that? Oh, whoa.
Yeah. Where there's just like this burst of this burst of questions.
Yes.
And you have to get to that point developmentally, right? Babies don't ask questions.
Right.
But so I like the way you framed it, that there's this internal piece before being ready to gather information outside of you. That feels really significant.
Yes. I mean, Aries is obviously more extroverted. It's more of like, this is who I am. And then everyone's like, and you're like, okay, well, am I this or am I that? That's the Taurus piece where you're kind of sussing out.
Well, Aries is externalized, but I think of it as being one directional.
One direction,
because it's coming from you out into the world. This I think of like the image of fishing, where you're externalized, but you're attempting to bring something back to you. And that's not what Aries is about, right? Exactly. It's kind of that, we talked about the id from Freud's perspective, the id, ego, and the superego.
Yep.
That Aries is like pure id, like this outward directed activity that doesn't really care where it lands and doesn't particularly care about bringing anything back.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you want to learn? What are you curious about? What excites you intellectually? You know, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which is the messenger of the gods, the planet of communication. So what excites you intellectually? What conversations do you want to have? Who do you want to connect with? What do you want to learn from them?
There's something so innocent about asking a question.
Exactly. And Gemini is on the light side, let's say, of the coin, is very gregarious and charming and funny. Yes. You know, there is the underside of the coin, which is maybe going to be more morose and serious, and it might be somewhat shocking. So expect the duality here during this Gemini period. Like if the first couple weeks of Gemini, you're feeling really high, like don't get too high, because there's going to need to be a cooling off period to balance it out. Or if you start the Gemini season and you're really low, don't get too low, because it's going to flip the switch, and by the second half you're going to start feeling lighter. So there is going to be the in and the out, the up and the down, the light and the shadow, all of that during the Gemini season. It's going to be the duality.
And that could really help fuel what you're learning.
Exactly, that's the point.
Because you're probably orienting towards your questions with hot and cold or black and white sort of perspective.
Exactly.
Which, you know, ideally we're ending up maybe with an integrated view of what we've learned. But I think starting with that dualistic perspective can really help us fully understand both sides of an issue, which can really bring a lot of value ultimately.
Exactly. So don't be surprised if you change your mind. Don't be upset at yourself if you change your mind. That's the nature of this Gemini energy, is to help you see both sides of the equation.
Right.
To experience the going left and to experience going right. And then, you know, no, I'm going to go back left again.
I think the highest expression of this is to land in a place where it's not this or that, it's this and
yes,
that.
Yes.
Like to
totally.
replace or with and to be able to hold both truths, like to be able to hold the duality and sort of rise above it and see it for what it is.
Yes.
Without getting completely swept up in one side having to be right and one side having to be wrong.
Absolutely.
Recognizing that two things can be true at the same time. And especially if you're talking to someone else who has a different chart, a different perspective, then they probably see a situation differently than you do. And it's not that either of you are right or wrong. It's that you're both right in the way that you experience that thing.
That's right. And so it's important for those that were born with key astrological points or planets in Virgo or Pisces to recognize that this energy may not be something that is necessarily easy for you to engage with, because Virgo can be very controlling, and Gemini is about, no, it doesn't have to be this or that. It can be this and that. And Virgo's like, but wait a second, we've got to be back in this one little area here. It's like, no, you can broaden it out a little bit. And the Pisces, Pisces is so compassionate and feels so much, and Gemini can be so glib that it can be very like insulting to Pisces. Like, I can't believe you said that. It's so hurtful to all these other people. And it's like, oh my God, you're taking yourself way too seriously. So, Pisces is mutable water, Virgo is mutable earth, Gemini is mutable air. They're all mutable. Air and earth don't mix. Air and water don't mix. That's what creates the tension there. So if you were born with key points or planets in Virgo or Pisces, take it easy on yourself. Give yourself the chance to really experience both sides of the equation and not get pigeonholed into one or the other.
I really think how I sort of conceptualize the difference between Gemini and Pisces is Gemini is thinking oriented, it's the mind, and Pisces is feeling oriented. And I know this happens a lot in couples relationships where there's an argument and one person is presenting with emotion and the other's presenting with logic, and it's like speaking two different languages. And again, it's not one is right and one is wrong, but they're not connecting because they're coming from different places.
Right.
But we know that we need access to our thoughts and access to our feelings, but I think that can be the split. And then Virgo wants to simplify and discern and cares about efficiency, and Gemini is just casting a wide net. It's like, hey, we're just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
We're learning.
Yes.
We're not ready to narrow yet. So I think that's the conflict there.
Yep, for sure. For sure, that makes a lot of sense. So as we move into Gemini with the sun, as the sun moves into Gemini, of course, that first aspect that it makes is with Pluto, the god of death, lord of the underworld, the planet of transformation, which is, of course, transiting retrograde now through the fixed air sign symbolized by the water bearer Aquarius. This aspect is occurring from May 20th to the 24th, forming an exact trine on Wednesday, May 22nd. So this is helping to transform the community, the group, the club, the organization, the fraternity, through sharing information. It's like one of the guys that asked me to speak said, the thing that really interests me about what you said about astrology is I've never heard it described as a language. I never thought about it that way. And it was really funny when you're like, do you believe in astrology? It's like saying, do you believe in English? Do you believe in Spanish? It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. It's, do you understand it or not?
Right.
It's not a belief. It's not a faith. It's not a religion. It's a language made up of symbols. And so just sharing that information, because I was asked the question, can you speak? I share this information. It helped change the thought process of the group on this one subject.
And this is why it's so important for you to be invited, because if you were to have just shared information, they need the curiosity
Yeah.
in order to be able to hear you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. Yes. I know that so well from not even as an astrologer, but just in my life in general.
Mm-hmm.
From the time I was a little kid, if I'm trying to push my way into a situation without being invited, it's not going to end well for me. So it just feels good to hang back and wait for the right people to say, hey, we're interested in being a part of what you're a part of, or hearing what you have to say, or would you like to come over here, rather than me inviting myself over to a certain place. So it felt so welcoming, and I was received so well because I had that invitation. And so with the sun in Gemini aligning with Pluto in Aquarius, what do you want to learn from the group? What do you want to share with the group? Who do you want to connect within the group?
Mm-hmm.
What groups do you want to connect to? What do you want to change and transform about the groups that you're involved in? Or what are you hoping that the groups that you're involved in are changing and transforming in you?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of this energy coming up here. I feel like, as Pluto's moving back through Aquarius, and it's going to hit Capricorn in early September, something is going to shift majorly there. Like there's going to be some sort of financial crash or real estate crash, just like we were seeing in 08, 09, when Pluto was moving in and out of Capricorn and Sagittarius. Capricorn rules real estate. And so it really feels like as Pluto dips into Aquarius here and is now pulling back, there's like information that we need to learn as a society in terms of how do we reassimilate to society once this potential dramatic shift occurs in the fall of this year.
And you think that's related to money somehow, or
I think
the economy?
I think the economy is going to be affected by this final transit of Pluto and Capricorn. I've been waiting for it to happen in the earlier ins and outs of Aquarius and Capricorn, Pluto jumping back and forth between those two signs, and it just feels like this fall leading into the election and, weird things happen around the election. It feels like something's going to happen. And so I really feel like this period of Gemini and Aquarius, the sun in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius, is going to be a good time to really share information, to learn, to listen, to connect, because the information that you're receiving right now is going to help you navigate your way through whatever dramatic shifts occur as Pluto makes that last gasp in Capricorn at the final degree. When things are at the final degree, that's when they get intense. Right. And so Pluto's going to be sitting there at that final degree of 29 degrees in Capricorn from early September to mid-November. That feels like tension that is going to bring about some sort of transformation to authority, potentially the real estate market. And so what can you learn during this period to help set you up and prepare you for what's to come in the fall?
Well, I think on a larger level, we have to recognize our power as consumers, as members in the community, about who we place in positions of power and authority, because we vote with our dollar every day. We vote with where we give our energy and attention. So there is a responsibility that we each carry in what even has authority, right?
Exactly.
If everyone stops following an Instagram account that has millions of followers, that I'm not saying that completely transforms that person's status as an authority, but I think we forget how much power we have when we make purchases, what music we listen to, what movies we watch. And so I'm wondering if there's something there around responsibility.
Yes.
The community recognizing, wow, this person or this situation that's in authority I've contributed to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that I hadn't done that, or I see my part. I see how the community has contributed to this person's rise in power or this situation,
Mm-hmm.
which that feels like a really important lesson.
Absolutely. And that's what these planets in Aries and the two that are still in Taurus are about. They're like, who am I? What is my value? What is my self-worth? Like, if everybody really recognized that this is the physical manifestation of your soul. Your body is the physical manifestation of your soul. Your soul is the power of your soul is infinite because it's connected to all that is, all that was, all that ever will be. But when it's encapsulated into a physical body, that power is, and energy is finite. It's not infinite because you have limitations as a human being, but you still have the ability to tap into that infinite power of your soul and to activate that power in different areas that are appropriate for you. This is why people are seeking to receive your attention, because your attention gives them power. So are the people that you are showing your attention to worthy of your power? People don't always see it that way. They look at that person who's up on the stage as the powerful one. Yeah. And it's like, well, yes, they have power, but so do you.
But they have power because you've given it to them.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, a very simple example of this from my fashion industry days is if customers stop buying a product,
oh boy,
we stop selling it. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, exactly.
If you stop buying it, it doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
So what are you purchasing with your energy? Whether it's money, whether it's time, what is it?
Yes, absolutely.
And is that the way that you want to continue using what you have to offer, using your time, using your resources?
Exactly. So where are you giving your energy? Where are you giving your power? And that leads us to the full moon in Sagittarius, which this full moon in Sagittarius, of course, the moon's in Sagittarius, the planet of emotions, the planet that represents your roots, your upbringing, your childhood, the ones who raised and nurtured you, your ancestors, your home life, in the mutable fire sign symbolized by the archer or the centaur, Sagittarius, which is opposite the sun in Gemini, which both are aligning with Pluto in Aquarius. So all three of these planets are aligning together. This is happening on Thursday, May 23rd at 6:53 a.m. Pacific time. Now, if you are curious to know how the next lunar cycle will be affecting you directly, I encourage you to enroll in my moon cycle classes at theweeklytransit.com. But Sagittarius is the sign of freedom, exploration, adventure. Like when I think of the archer, I think of Robin Hood. Robin Hood's like, I'm on my own here. You know, I got Friar Tuck. We hang for a bit, but I'm out here doing my own thing. You know, I like Friar Tuck because like we have these philosophical conversations about life on Earth, why we're here. Is there a God? What is God? What's the whole purpose of all of this? That's what this is about. So we're being stretched. We're being expanded. You know, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion. So what do you need to do to set yourself free? What would you like to do to share your wisdom with the community, with the group, the club, the organization, the social network, the social cause? What is right? What is wrong? What is ethical? What wisdom do I have to share and channel with others?
I think this axis between Gemini and Sagittarius can also be simplified in terms of knowing versus not knowing. Like channeling that wisdom versus asking the questions. And so that could be part of the gap that's being created, or the tension that's being created between the two.
Yes.
Oftentimes in my experience, sometimes I ask a question, and then whatever information I get back from that other person ignites something in me that's connected to my own knowing. Because when we're asking for someone's opinion, we're asking for their perspective, but it doesn't mean that it's our perspective.
Right.
So there can be kind of an interesting relationship, I think, between knowing and not knowing. Sagittarius being the knowing that you're describing.
Yes.
Being connected to all the wisdom of the universe. And then Gemini is, okay, but what about this? Which it makes sense that they're opposites. Because they're both really these sorts of extremes in terms of how you get knowledge. They're both ultimately about knowledge, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And then sharing that knowledge with the group, with the community, as they're aligning to Pluto in Aquarius.
Right.
So that's like sort of bridging the gap between the two. It's like you have this group where there's somebody who's sharing the wisdom, channeling the wisdom, and then you have the other people in the group that are asking the questions. And then it shifts to other people in the group. Now the person that was asking the questions is sharing their wisdom. And
I want to say, too, that there is so much wisdom in asking the right questions.
Totally.
Too.
Yes.
So I don't mean to sort of minimize this Gemini piece, because I think, look at like the great interviewers of our time. They ask the right question,
Totally.
Asking it the right way, really getting to sort of the heart of an issue. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in the ability to ask the right question.
Totally.
I think a lot about my work as a therapist, and I'm like, oh, what is the right question to ask here? Because there's something to be extracted. So I wanted to say that, and also connect it back to what you said about freedom, because I think ultimately knowledge is the truest form of freedom.
Yes.
No matter what source it comes from.
That's right. That's right. Knowledge is power, as they said, or freedom. Like knowledge. Yes. That wisdom. So a powerful full moon in Sagittarius. We're all going to be dancing naked around the fire. And yes, here we are. Expressing ourselves fully. And as this is happening, literally on the same day, is Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, the planet of relationships, forms a conjunction with the planetary ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, the god of thunder, lord of justice, the planet of luck and expansion, together at the final degree, the 29th degree of the sign that Venus rules, the fixed earth sign symbolized by the bull, Taurus. This conjunction is occurring from Monday to Sunday, the full week, but it forms that exact conjunction the same day as the full moon, Thursday, May 23rd. So it feels like there is growth happening here in terms of our awareness of what we value and how those values are reflected in the people that we're in relationship with, whether it be a lover, a friend, a business partner, a fraternity brother. It's, you see the values. There's going to be hopefully a lot of clarity here. And through that clarity, there will be an elevation of understanding and awareness and appreciation through one another, so that in being free, we feel that connectivity to each other. That I truly feel free because I feel understood by you and I understand you. And I see the reflection that we have to each other. And because I look at you and I see a part of myself in you, and I just look at you and I'm like, wow, you're so beautiful. You're so brilliant. You're so bright. I sure love myself then. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel free.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's some of what this Venus conjunct Jupiter in Taurus energy will be about.
And also, could it also indicate enjoying the learning process and
enjoying the learning process and enjoying the senses, the 5 physical senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. This is what looks good. This is what sounds good. This is what feels good, tastes good. All the feels, all the material energy that you enjoy is coming to the surface here.
Well, and realizing the ways that we are learning from all of our senses, that when you're asking questions, you're learning from what you hear. But, you look at a baby, a child, the way that they learn before they can grasp language, they're learning through all of their senses.
Exactly, yes.
Everything they're touching, they're putting their feet in their mouth, they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to get all the senses involved.
Yes.
So I think when we consider what are we learning, there's also our whole bodies can be involved and ideally should be involved.
Yes, absolutely.
We're a little bit conditioned to think that learning has to be a purely intellectual experience because we're reading textbooks, we're taking tests, and that's how we measure knowledge on sort of a mass level. But you go out and go for a walk in silence, you're going to learn something.
Totally. Well, I think of when I think of Venus and Taurus, I think of wine. And you can read a lot of books on wine, but you're not going to know anything about wine unless you taste the wine.
Well, and that's really the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
Right? Knowledge is you've read the book. Wisdom, you've read the book on wine. Wisdom is that you've tasted the wine.
Yes, exactly.
And you're running it through your personal
You've smelled
system.
You look at it. You see it. You see it in the glass. You smell it, the aroma and the bouquet, and then you taste it and you have that experience. So it's the sight, smell, and taste, and even touch, the way that it feels in your mouth.
All of it.
All of that
is really important.
That's how you learn about the wine. It's not from reading it in a book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. The book is kind of like the addendum to the actual experience.
Sometimes the book can get in the way of the experience.
Yeah, totally.
It's because the book is written by someone who has a certain perception, which may or may not be your perception.
Well, and that's how I feel about astrology too, and how I'm self-taught, because reading a book, I was just
it's like a dial tone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But when I started looking at people's faces and thinking about their personalities and the sound of their voice and their bodies,
you were sipping
and their
on
hair
that wine.
color, how come all these fire signs have red hair? It's this is where you're actually tasting the wine. I'm like, I see it. Can't you see it? It's right there. You hear? I remember this one time, this guy that I worked with at the restaurant. I looked at the chart of his girlfriend that he was dating at the time. I was like, does she have kind of I don't know how to put this, I don't know, a nice way, but kind of a nasally sort of voice, she talks like this. He's like, yeah, how do you know that? I'm like, because I see it in her chart. So she just has a certain tone to her voice that's kind of in the nasal cavity a little bit. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly how she sounds. That's really weird that you're picking that up from looking at that chart.
Wow. So interesting.
Yes. So Venus on this same day, May 23rd, as it forms an exact conjunction with Jupiter in Taurus, transits into Gemini on May 23rd, where it will be until June 16th. The last time Venus transited through Gemini was April 10th to May 7th, 2023. The time before that was June 22nd to July 17th, 2022. So think back to these dates for clues on what could be in store for you this time around, as the goddess of love, transits through the sign symbolized by the twins. So whether you are in a committed relationship or you are single, this is a great time to experience the variety of those senses. You don't want to get stuck into the monotony of your relationship, the redundancy, the habits, the patterns of your relationships. You want to switch it up a little bit. Be a little more spontaneous in your relationships. And if you are single, this is a great time to play the field, to go on a lot of different dates. Don't get too serious with anyone. Just learn a little bit about this person, learn a little bit about that person. And if you're in a relationship, by switching it up and doing things differently in your relationship than you have most regularly, you're going to learn something new about your partner.
I think that's the key there. If you are in a committed relationship, to be mindful of making assumptions. Ask more questions.
Yes.
I think a lot of conflicts in relationships happen because we've made an assumption. We have a belief that we know what's happening for the other person, and we probably don't.
Right.
And it really has a way of fueling the fire and the conflict when we approach our partner that way, versus just asking what their experience is and having a chance to learn something.
Exactly. So some great questions could be, what do you want to learn about your partner? You think you know everything about your partner. What questions can you come up with to learn something new about your lover, your friend, your business partner? Who would you like to connect with? What would you like to learn from them? If you think you know everything about them, challenge yourself to ask some questions that can maybe invite a new conversation with somebody that you've been in relationship with for some time.
And ask a question with really the honest intention of learning.
Yes.
And not sort of one of those questions.
It's like accusatory, or
where you're really saying you already know the answer, but it's phrased as a question.
Exactly.
That doesn't go well.
No. And that's not the light-sided Gemini. You know, Gemini is like, tell me about this. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, well, what's going on there? You know, really, the Gemini energy is really wanting to learn, not assuming that they know the answer. No, we're not doing that. And that's part of what that full moon in Sagittarius is about, is releasing that know-it-all energy that I have the answer. Like, let's release that energy. Let's understand that of all the things that there are to be known in the world and in the universe, you probably know an atom of your eyelash. I mean, there's so much, there's way more for you to learn than what it is you think you know.
Right.
So part of that full moon in Sagittarius is releasing that know-it-all attitude, and tapping into the Gemini energy is, what do I want to learn about Gabriella? I feel like I know everything about her, but there's got to be something they don't know. So, and if you don't know what that question is, maybe the question is, could you tell me something about yourself that you don't think that I know about you?
What a great question.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that sort of that Sagittarius wisdom, that sort of know-it-all, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that you're not orienting towards that.
Right.
You're switching gears. You're orienting towards what you don't know in order to inform yourself more fully in your relationships.
Exactly. That's it.
Yep.
And so, as this is happening, Venus, of course, like the sun before it, is going to align with Pluto in Aquarius. This occurs from May 23rd until May 26th, Thursday to Sunday, with an exact trine occurring on Saturday, May 25th. So this is helping facilitate that transformation of your relationships within the group, the club, the organization, the social network, the social cause. As you create that openness to learn something new from those within your group dynamic or within the community or society that you're a part of, you are also facilitating the transformation of those relationships, and also inviting new relationships that are more attuned to the frequency that you are emanating through the questions that you're asking. Oh, you know what? That is a good question. I don't really have the answer to that, but you know who does is my friend over here. Have you met so-and-so? Let me connect the two of you. That's some of what could happen this week with this Venus trine Pluto energy. So be open to the connection within the group, asking questions, connecting people together that don't know each other.
And ultimately, that's going to create new kind of sub-communities, right?
Sub-communities, new knowledge. Absolutely. Yes.
Yep.
New communities based on the new knowledge that, oh, you like this and they like that. So the two of you should connect. Oh, now we've got our own club over here of the people that know this thing. And so this is really just like this web. I feel like this web is happening here with all this Gemini energy, and then it just continues to expand, because on Saturday, May 25th, is when Jupiter, the planet of expansion and luck, transits into Gemini. And Jupiter is going to be transiting through Gemini from May 25th to June 9th, 2025. So for over a year, the planet of luck and expansion is going to be transiting through the mutable air sign, symbolized by the twins, the sign of communication, Gemini, which is expanding our intellectual nature, our philosophical views. Our philosophical views are going to become more inquisitive, where we're going to be asking more philosophical questions, perhaps. There's going to be a lightness in wanting to connect to others. I feel like over this next year, with Jupiter transiting through Gemini, connecting is going to be expanding. The last time Jupiter transited through Gemini was June 11th, 2012 to June 25th, 2013. The time before that was June 30th, 2000 to July 12th, 2001. So think back to those points in time, if you can remember. Maybe some of you are too young to remember, but what was going on in your life during that period? Like for me, I clearly remember both of those periods were expansive periods for me, where I was meeting a lot of new people. In 2000, 2001, that's when I was getting involved in acting classes and those sorts of things. So I was meeting a lot of different people through acting classes. In 2012 to 2013, I was starting a new job. And so I was at this new restaurant, and I was connecting to a lot of different people. But seemed to be, those both really seemed like times in my life where there's a lot of conversations happening.
A lot of newness.
What do you think about this? What do you think about that? A lot of questions around philosophical views. Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? Trying to make sense of life.
Right.
But asking the question in sort of a lighter sense, and not like in this deep, heavier way.
Right.
Like, well, what do you think about this? Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? And just kind of,
because
I'm not really sure what to think about that.
Yeah, because a lot of those questions don't have a perfect answer
Exactly.
or maybe an answer at all.
Yes.
So I think this Gemini energy is about enjoying being with the question more than necessarily arriving at an answer.
Yes.
Because sometimes you learn through the process of a truly curious perspective. sometimes you end up with more questions than answers.
Right.
And I think when that happens, like in therapy, for example, that can be a real sign of progress to identify what the questions are.
Right.
And sure, you want to arrive to some answers as well, but the more you can continue to identify what is there to be learned, what don't I know yet about myself or about my relationship, the closer you are, there's an openness instead of a closed sort of a view.
So like when you're saying that when you ask the questions and it leads to more questions, that it's really the question that helps you understand yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of this question, like, why are we here? I mean, that's a question that, sure, there are different opinions about it. Some people might feel like they have an answer, but we can probably all agree that even if someone has an answer, we don't know if that's right. You know, it's not about arriving at a perfect answer. It's about enjoying the process of not knowing.
And the fact that the question's there in the first place. Like, I feel like I have this experience with several of my cosmic pathway clients where I will ask them a question, or I will ask them a question that they should maybe ask a significant person in their life. And they're like, I never thought about asking that question. And just the fact that the question got brought up in the first place helps satisfy something within them.
It creates some expansion.
Yes, exactly. Whereas like now that I know that this question is out there, I feel like I have a deeper understanding even without knowing the answer to the question.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the week. Really feels really inspiring to me.
It does.
And, obviously we're going to be talking about the Sun in Gemini, Venus in Gemini, of course, Jupiter in Gemini, much more as we move forward and they start aligning with other planets. Next week, we'll talk about Jupiter aligning with, I think it's next week or the week after, we'll talk about Jupiter aligning with Pluto in Aquarius, because that's not quite happening yet, but it's about to. And so it just feels like a lot of big shifts are occurring and things are opening up, things are lightening up. And there's a real opportunity to connect through listening, learning, and tapping into your inquisitive nature.
Sounds great.
Yes. So, on that note, should we do a couple questions?
Yes, we should. Our first question comes from Jess. How can I best work with squares in my chart and lean more into certain energies? I noticed that my moon, rising, Mercury are cardinal signs, and my moon, rising, Mars are ruled or exalted by Mars.
Okay, Jess, thanks for the question. So I love the crypticness of the question here. My moon rising and Mercury are cardinal signs, and my moon rising Mars are ruled or exalted by Mars. So that tells me that your moon rising and Mercury are either in Aries or Capricorn, because Aries is the cardinal sign that rules Mars, and Capricorn is the cardinal sign that is exalted by Mars, or where Mars is exalted, I should say. So it sounds like you're asking me how to best work with squares in my charts, because the squares that are in your chart are Capricorn and Aries, because Capricorn is cardinal earth, Aries is cardinal fire. They're both cardinal. They're 90 degrees apart from each other. That creates the square. Earth extinguishes fire. Fire scorches earth. The challenge between Aries and Capricorn is they both want to lead. They're both cardinal. Aries is hit first, ask questions later, where Capricorn is, well, we've got to plan this out. Aries is like, what do you mean plan? Like, let's just charge up the hill. We got to get to the top. Like, let's just start running. Where Capricorn's like, but first, we can't just run. We got to go this way, then that way, and plot out our course. So the best way to work with those squares in your chart is I would say find the balance between the two. What is the impulse that you're feeling? That's Aries. And channel that impulse into making a plan, which is going to satisfy your Capricorn energy.
Use the Aries as the motivation.
The motivation
to make the plan.
To make the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's it. Because Capricorn is about planning. Aries is about moving forward, attacking. So attack the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But have a plan.
Could it also be, tell me what you think about this, when there's a square, could it also mean that sometimes you do one of those things and another time you do another? Or would you say the square is inviting you to really find sort of the compromise between the two?
I think it could be both. That sometimes you just need to charge ahead, and sometimes you need to sit back and plan, and sometimes you need to find the balance between the two.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's some wisdom to be sort of discerned here between, like you're saying, when to be impulsive and when to have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
If there's maybe...
Well, that's why I'm curious to know. I'm curious to know what planet is in what sign. Like, is the moon in Aries or is the moon in Capricorn?
Yeah, that would be helpful, Jess, if you could give us a little more information.
Because if the moon is in Aries, then Jess is going to be emotionally fulfilled by charging ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But if the moon is in Capricorn, then Jess is going to be emotionally fulfilled by having a goal and doing the work required to plot out, plan to achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And if Mercury... Yeah, it's too vague for me to be so specific.
Yeah, I think that's the most we can say about this for now.
But I hope that's helpful to you, Jess.
Yeah,
let me
please
know.
let us know.
Yeah, and follow up with another question if you like.
Definitely.
Happy to hear from you.
Our next question comes from Chrissy Rainbow. What does each house relate to, and how do I relate that to my chart? P.S. I've been listening to your podcast for years now through its transitions and growth. Thanks for sharing your gifts.
You're welcome, Chrissy. Thank you for your question. It's wonderful to hear from you. So, what does each house relate to, and how do I relate that to my chart? So, each house has a theme, and the theme is associated with the sign that is associated with the house, which is also confirmed by the planetary ruler of each house, which is the same planetary ruler of the sign that is associated with the house. So the first house is associated with the first sign, which is Aries. That's the house of personality. This is who I am. I'm Scott. That's the personality. So that's the theme of the first house. The second house is associated with the second sign, which is Taurus. That's the house of security. This is what I'm worth. This is my value. This is what I value. The third house is associated with the third sign, which is Gemini. That's the house of communication. So that house is about listening, learning, connecting, communicating, asking questions. The fourth house is associated with the fourth sign, which is Cancer. Cancer, the fourth house, the house of home, is about your roots, your upbringing, your childhood, the ones who raised and nurtured you, and your ancestors. This is where I come from. The fifth house is associated with the fifth sign, which is Leo. This is the house of children. This is about fun, games, play, dating, love life, romance. This is what I enjoy. That's what the fifth house is about. I enjoy this. The sixth house is associated with the sixth sign, which is Virgo. This is the house of service. This is the house that represents your daily routine, your health, your diet, your job. This is what I do from day to day. So going back over the first six houses, the first house, this is who I am. Second house, this is what I value. Third house, what do I want to learn? This is what I want to learn. Fourth house is this is where I come from. Fifth house is this is what I enjoy. And the sixth house is this is what I spend. This is what I do for work based on what I enjoy, where I come from, what I've learned, what I value, who I am. Then you get to the second 6 houses, and those are the houses that are more about relating to other people. So the 7th house is associated with the 7th sign, which is Libra. This is the house of marriage, which represents your close personal relationships, friends, lovers, business partners. The 7th house is who I relate to or who I want to relate to, who I'm attracted to, who I'm interested in. The 8th house is associated with the 8th sign, which is Scorpio. This is the house of death. This is the energy that represents your karmic bonds, your intimate relationships, the people that you share secrets, sex, and money with. So this is like amping up that 7th house relationship energy. The 7th house is the negotiation. The 8th house is merging together as one. So then by the time we get to the 9th house, which is associated with the 9th sign, Sagittarius, the house of philosophy, now that we've merged power with another person, I'm seeing the world from a whole different perspective. Not just my own, but the perspective of the one that I'm bonded to. The 10th house is associated with the 10th sign, which is Capricorn. This is the house of achievement. Now that I have this new philosophy, I know what it is I want to achieve, what I want to accomplish, what is really worth my time in working on, the legacy that I want to leave behind. Once we've done that, now we move to the 11th house, which is associated with the 11th sign, which is Aquarius. This is the house of friendship. Now that I've achieved something, this is what I want to give back to the community, the group, the club, the organization, the social network, the social cause. This is the individual idea that I have, this genius idea that is based on what I've achieved. And then the final house, which is associated with the final sign, Pisces, the house of the unconscious. Once we've shared that energy with the community, now it's time to tuck back into bed, go to sleep, and reflect on what we've learned through the cycle of the 12 houses. So, how do I relate that to my chart? That depends on what signs are in those 12 houses. So I encourage you, Chrissy, reach out to me for a reading and we can get into what all that means for you specifically. But thank you for listening to the podcast and your support all these years. And thank you for your wonderful question.
Okay.
And thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any others may be affecting you, or if you are interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. If you're interested in delving into the world of psychotherapy with Gabriella, you can connect with her at innervisionpsychotherapy.com. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.